Lost in the shadows of Transylvania, Emma and Lily, filled with excitement, eagerly plan their trip to Transylvania. Their eyes sparkle with curiosity as they discuss the legends of vampires and haunted castles that draw them to the region. Their fascination with the supernatural grows as they delve into tales of nocturnal creatures and mysterious disappearances. The allure of ancient ruins and the promise of adventure fuel their anticipation. Upon arrival, the women find themselves in a small, remote village shrouded in mystery. The cobblestone streets and old-world charm create an enchanting yet eerie atmosphere, heightening their sense of adventure. Now they were in Transylvania, with one final destination in mind, a forgotten, unnamed castle perched on a mist-shrouded hill. The castle was not on any map. They had overheard whispers about it in a small village. The locals refused to talk about it directly, but mentioned a place that no one should ever enter. Intrigued, the two women decided to investigate. As they trekked toward the ominous structure, the forest grew darker, the air colder. Emma led the way, flashlight in hand, while Sophie followed, her nervous laughter betraying her unease. The closer they got, the heavier the air seemed to become, as though the castle itself was a living entity, watching and waiting. Why were there lights on if the castle was abandoned? The gate stood ajar, creaking as they pushed it open. Inside the courtyard, a thick fog swirled around their feet. The castle loomed above them, its crumbling towers lost in the gloom. "This place is amazing," Emma whispered. She sounded more intrigued than afraid. Sophie wasn't so sure. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified. "Let's make this quick," she muttered, but Emma was already heading toward the entrance. Reluctantly, Sophie followed. The door opened with a groan, revealing a vast, dark hallway. The air inside was thick with dust and decay. "Look at this," Emma exclaimed, her voice bouncing off the stone walls. She pointed to an old portrait hanging on the wall. The entire castle was filled with portraits, all of women. A woman with hollow eyes stared back at them, her face pale, her expression unreadable. "Creepy," Emma laughed, snapping a photo on her phone. Sophie's eyes were drawn to the woman's face. Something about it felt off, as though the painting was aware of their presence. She shook her head, trying to push the unease aside. "We should go," Sophie urged. But Emma wasn't listening. She was drawn to an enormous mirror at the far end of the room, its glass fogged with age. "Sophie, come look at this." Sophie hesitated but moved toward the mirror. As they stood in front of it, something strange happened. Their reflections stared back at them, but the rest of the room didn't. The grand hall behind them was absent from the mirror's surface. "That's weird," Emma whispered, her voice less confident now. She wiped her hand across the glass, but the reflection remained the same. Just them, standing in a void. Suddenly, the door to the hall slammed shut behind them. Sophie jumped, grabbing Emma's arm. "What was that?" Emma tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. "Maybe it's just the wind." Sophie wasn't convinced. There was no wind. "We need to leave, Emma," Sophie insisted, her voice trembling. Emma nodded. They turned to leave, but as they reached the door, it wouldn't budge. Emma pushed harder, panic rising in her chest. It stuck, and then they heard it, a soft shuffling sound from the hall behind them. They spun around. The woman from the portrait stood in the doorway, her pale face illuminated by a faint, flickering light. Her eyes were empty, black holes that bore into them. She glided forward, her tattered dress trailing behind her like a shadow. The woman's lips twisted into a grotesque smile as she raised a bony hand toward them. "Go away," Emma screamed, her voice echoing through the hall. The figure stopped, but her eyes never left them. She whispered something, a language they couldn't understand, before fading into the darkness. The door behind them creaked open suddenly. Without hesitation, Sophie and Emma bolted through it, sprinting down the dark corridors. The walls twisted and turned as if the castle itself was trying to trap them. Every corner led them back to the grand hall, the mirror now cracked, reflecting a distorted version of the room. Finally, they found the exit, bursting into the cold night air. They didn't stop running until they were far from the castle, its dark silhouette barely visible through the mist. Gasping for breath, they collapsed on the forest floor. "What the hell was that?" Sophie managed between gasps. "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice shaking. "But I'm never going back." Neither of them noticed the woman standing at the castle's entrance, watching as they disappeared into the fog. Her hollow eyes gleamed with satisfaction before she turned and vanished into the shadows.